have a new book alert. Please go and support if you are able. It is called La Obra. It is written by Marina Pareda. It is, as of now, only available in Spanish, so I understand North American listeners, English speakers, are probably not going to be as excited about this, but if you are able and you care to, please consider buying a copy of the book to support Marina and to support victim survivors telling their stories just in general. I have ordered my copy and it'll be showing up at some point, but Marina was kind enough to actually send me a PDF version of her book, which has been amazing. I've been going through and translating the chapters. I've started sharing excerpts over on the Deep Dive Project's Instagram page. It is an incredible book. Marina is an incredible writer. The way that she talks about the experience of growing up as a girl, and most specifically growing up as a girl within a very rigid, authoritarian, conservative, religious environment, is just, she puts the experience into words in a way that I struggle to consistently. And I have nothing but good things to say about this book. Please go and support her if you can, and let me read you this article about her book and about what prompted her to write it. This is from El Diario. The headline says, within Opus Dei since the age of 14. Quote, they don't put a gun to your head, but the manipulation is constant. Marina Pareda was a member of the organization founded by Escriva de Balaguer for a decade, an experience she now recounts in first person in La Obra, a book in which she details the complex machinery of pressures that operates within and which, in her case, had an effect from a very young age. And here she is. She's an absolute doll, and I'm so happy that she decided to write her story because it is one that deserves to be told. For a whole decade, the sound of the alarm clock signaled the start of Marina Pareda's great daily battle. Known as the Heroic Minute, it's the first of the practices consecrated to God that celibate members of Opus Dei must perform at the start of the day. Getting up as soon as the alarm rings, quickly, without hesitation, without dawdling or waiting a minute longer. A spiritual requirement that, for those who aren't early risers like her, was a source of constant anxiety and guilt. Afterward would come the cold shower, what I say about the cold showers earlier, and perhaps foregoing the sugar in her breakfast coffee. If it wasn't Sunday, it might be time to place the cilice around her thigh for 2 hours, one more sacrifice for God. And of course, the cilice is the spiked chain that Opus Dei members wear as part of their corporal mortification. These are some of the so-called daily mortifications that celibate members of Opus Dei, Work of God in Latin, routinely apply to themselves as a way of fulfilling their divine mission of becoming holier and more disciplined under the premise that great physical or psychological suffering, quote-unquote, sanctifies the world. This is not an empty threat. These are some of the established practices that Marina Pareda witnessed and experienced firsthand during the 10 years that she spent in the organization. Founded in 1928 by Jose Maria Escriva de Balaguer, and she now recounts in her book La Obra, which was published this Thursday. So this article was published April 10th. So it was published that and released that previous Thursday. So you can find it now, pre-order it, order it. Through her own experience and with a healthy dose of irony, Marina describes how the order operates from within, transformed in 1982 by Pope John Paul II, the same pope who canonized its founder, into the only personal prelature of the Catholic Church. Quote, before I read that, I have heard rumors, I have read things in some of the research that I've done, that there are other organizations, Catholic organizations out there that technically meet the requirements of being a personal prelature, but they just don't have the title. There are a couple in Latin America specifically that I'm thinking, I can't think of the names right now off the top of my head, but just an interesting thing that I wanted to throw out there. I've had people fight me on that before because I've said that Opus Dei is the Catholic Church's most well-known personal prelature. Technically, they're the only personal prelature, but there are other organizations that are structured very similarly, which I think is really interesting. Anyway, there's this quote here. I would like it to help someone unfamiliar with it understand the structure behind it. We are not isolated cases, notes the author, who metaphorically likens the institution to a vast theatrical set with members obligated to play a seemingly simple role, that of holiness in everyday life, which can ultimately become a suffocating mask. Born in Miranda de Ebro, Burgos, into a large family of 7 children whose parents are members of Opus Dei, Marina was never untouched by its dynamics and from a young age began attending the club in Vitoria where Opus Dei organizes activities regularly. Quote, the clubs are officially cultural associations, always segregated by sex, where they do dance, theater, cooking, in principle, non-religious activities, but between one thing and another, they start suggesting a talk with the priest, a confession. They insist on whether you pray. Why don't you pray a little more? Whether you ask Escriva for miracles. That's how it becomes normalized, explained Marina, who in 2025 was one of the protagonists of the HBO documentary, The Heroic Minute, which exposes the internal dynamics of Opus Dei through 13 testimonials. Clubs, along with schools, training centers, and foundations, are some of the entry points. It's common for regular members to be pressured to bring other friends along. Recruitment sounds harsh, but it's a constant atmosphere. Sometimes they're just trying to create a good image, trying to get them to attend some leisure activity or a parent event like a talk with a prestigious figure, explains Marina. These clubs are usually the residents of the numeraries who organize the activities, practice sexual abstinence, and dedicate their lives to the organization. Supernumeraries can marry and have children. Throughout the book, divided into acts emulating a play, Marina explains what she defines as the carefully orchestrated mechanism of pressures that influenced her decision to request admission to Opus Dei at the age of 14 and a half. It happened during Holy Week in 2004 at a camp with 40 other girls between the ages of 13 and 16, all potential candidates, so hopeful recruits for Opus Dei's machine. Marina had previously attended a retreat where she was to reflect on, quote, what God was asking of me, end quote. And we all know what that means, right? Because nobody has ever heard of having a vocation to Opus Dei until they're informed of it, it seems. And the numeraries and the priest, through conversations and private talks, had already been guiding the young woman toward the option of becoming a numerary, a category considered a total and superior commitment. The woman, now 36, remembers the letter she had to write to apply for admission as a candidate, but in practice, from that day forward, she began incorporating the dynamics and customs of a member into her daily life. Quote, they called us associates in the organization's terminology, but we all considered ourselves numeraries, she says. The pressure and discomfort always coexisted with the promise of salvation and the instilled belief that she was accepting God's plan until at 16, during her first 15-day retreat for those who had applied, she expressed her doubts to the director. The response wasn't, relax, you're very young, think about it, but rather she tried to convince me that I could become an associate, she notes, which is another category of membership. In practice, associates like numeraries, but without the obligation to live in a center with other members. This was the status Marina maintained until she left the institution in 2013 at the age of 24. The entire process was marked by an atmosphere in which she couldn't back down, as she describes in the book, an atmosphere that took its toll on her, a very religious and obedient girl. If she said no, she felt she was doing something wrong, being rebellious and arrogant, as she had already been taught. The director had no doubts about my vocation to celibacy, and if I gave in now, I would be saying no to God, which is what the fallen angel had done, she recounts. And remember what I said earlier about how people underage, people with brains that are not fully formed, are simply incapable of engaging and practicing true informed consent? Like, there is zero chance in Marina's situation that the choice to participate or not in this Opus Dei thing was never really a choice at all. It was a carrot with a stick. It's always a carrot with a stick. And the option to back down is apparently never there. The demand is to give more and more and more and more. And if you become resistant to that, if you begin to put boundaries in place, if you begin to step back and see the forest for the trees, you will be accused of having bad spirit. Because in Opus Dei, The problems are never the result of the environment that has been created in this organization, never the result of the extremely narrow and misogynistic writings and teachings of their founder, never the result of this omerta of complete and total silence and control that seems to be exerted over people's lives. No. It's never any of those things. It's your fault for failing. And that is all put on the individual. And can you imagine the impact that that would have on somebody who is still a child? You barely have any understanding of the world yet, certainly no understanding of yourself. I mean, you aren't even you're a half-baked human at this point in time. And your life, your potential, your gifts, your attributes end up being subverted and hijacked by this system. It is so exploitative. It is so obviously exploitative and harmful that it baffles the mind how anyone could look at this information and not go, yeah, objectively, we've got a problem here. If this was a political outfit that was recruiting children, like some sort of like Hitler Youth, to mobilize them for some sort of nationalistic purpose, oh my God, the outcry, people would be in the streets. But when it's a religious context, religious people who in many other cases would be the first to say, whoa, this isn't good, all of a sudden are much more trusting. And why could that be? Could it be because these people are placed in an environment where you can't back down, and where the atmosphere is such that you must conform or it is absolute torture? And then also you factor in the interpersonal and professional entanglements that often come in because of the fact that this organization is so enmeshed in every single aspect of society. People get so incredibly tangled up that they can never fully get out. And even if they do get out, they very often cannot speak out about the things that they experienced because of the wrath that they would incur, the negative backlash that they would have inflicted upon them and their families, perhaps their careers, all that they hold dear, by the other people in this organization. Because once you stray from the groupthink, once you display that bad spirit, now you are an enemy of the state, practically. The modus operandi she experienced, which she has compared with that of dozens of former members, she describes as a process of constant manipulation. They don't put a gun to your head, there's no need for that, but there is psychological pressure, she points out. Over time, she has realized that from the beginning, she experienced a conditioning of freedom and a filtering of information that guided her every step of the way. What did I just say? They don't tell you, look, these are the options, or you'll see, but rather they insist that you have been called to this, and supposedly you have to understand the rules as you follow them, because that will bring you closer to God. And of course, if you don't, you will be dooming yourself and your family and all of your loved ones to eternal damnation in hell. The carrot and the stick. When asked about these practices, Opus Dei's communication office responded that it deeply respects every person's experience and refers to the channels of dialogue opened in recent years to listen to former members. Sure, you're listening, but are you actually internalizing what you're hearing? Is there any critical thought happening in the background as you're listening to this information? And oh, by the way, can anyone point me to anything that has been implemented for these former members that is anything more substantial than a fucking email address? Somebody's email address. Sure, send us your complaints and your worries to this. We'll take care of you. Yeah, sure. Haven't seen proof positive of it yet. I could be proven wrong. I'd be happy to be proven wrong, but I haven't seen it. As a member of the public, I don't have access to that information. And it seems to me that quite a few former members don't either. And that's a problem, friends. Furthermore, the response includes a link to an interview with Lydia Villa, who works as the head of youth activities at the Regional Advisory Office of Opus Dei in Spain. In the text, Villa states that the process of vocational discernment is gradual and long, with several milestones, so that only those who freely wish to join can do so after several years. The interview emphasizes that admission can be requested from the age of 16 and a half, after which the discernment process can continue. It also acknowledges that at 14 and a half, there are aspirant girls and boys who sense a call from God to belong to the Opus Dei as celibate persons, but who cannot yet do so. In these cases, the work acknowledges this desire and accompanies this process according to their age. I think you're full of fucking shit, and I don't believe you. I don't believe you. Show me the proof. I don't believe you. The environment that is being described and has been exemplified, illustrated, exposed time and time and time again from numerous former members with firsthand experience, right? These aren't tabloids just running with crazy theories. These are people with firsthand knowledge. Doesn't seem like there is ever an opportunity for these people to authentically engage with true informed consent in the decisions that they make when it comes to interacting with this organization in any way, shape, or form. I don't believe them. I don't believe them at all. I think they're lying. That's my opinion. I'm not making any accusations because obviously I can't verify any of this. I'm not on the inside of this organization. All I have to go off of is statements that are made, articles that are written, and God bless the many, many former members who take the time to write about their experiences on places like Opus Dei Exposed and Opus Libris and in books like La Obra. Otherwise, we would have no way of knowing because this organization clearly is not going to be forthcoming and only make statements, only have something to say when they are backed into such a corner that they have no other option, where the optics would be so tremendously bad that they have to. That's the only time. And methinks they doth protest too much. Throughout the book, the former Opus Dei member details the influence she believes the priests and spiritual directors she had during her ordeal had on her, defining these figures as key tools within a structure that allows them to forge a forced trust with girls and young women, ultimately becoming their vital and spiritual confidants. At one point, Marina recounts how she would tell them all her secrets after they asked her about her friends, her relationship with her family, her prayers and mortifications, or whether she liked any boys. One of the first guidelines was to avoid associating with men her own age. Quote, I was forbidden from looking at boys or being friends with them. I would occasionally go out partying with friends, but I felt very strange, and little by little you start incorporating elements of social distancing, she explains. She also recounts how she had to review the films and books she wanted to watch or read to avoid temptations or ideas that could jeopardize her faith and commitment, although cinema was always an escape for her, a place to imagine herself and reconnect with the world beyond the organization. And can I just say once again how incredibly ironic I find it that Opus Dei claims to be an organization that is in the world, where people live their lives as their vocations, and yet apparently people are, their faith and their beliefs are so flimsy, such flim-flam, that they have to screen and censor anything from the outside world that they interact with. This is an organization, ladies and gentlemen, that is out in the world, but their members can't watch like mainstream films. They can't make those decisions for themselves. They have to go through their chain of command, as it were, for that. Numerous articles talk about how the Daily Mail undercover investigation talked about how these women and girls can only watch certain approved films that are like rated U, universal, or like G for general audiences, like kid stuff, basically. Everybody's so worried about these temptations and ideas that could jeopardize their faith. For an organization that's supposed to be in the middle of the world, it doesn't seem like they can deal with the world very well at all. In fact, far from being an organization that is in the world, it seems very isolationist. Although her status as an associate member didn't require her to live in an Opus Dei residence, Marina eventually moved to a study and work center in Bilbao when she was almost 16. She wasn't keen on the idea. She didn't want to leave her hometown of Miranda or her family. However, under the pretext that her vocation was threatened in her city due to the bad influences at the public high school she attended and the lack of Opus Dei centers there, she finally agreed. They had to get her somewhere where they could exert more control over her. Why? Because if she continues to kind of straddle the fence in between this very strange Opus Dei world and everybody else, chances are really good that at some point she's going to be able to step back and look at the forest for the trees. What do you know? Eventually she did. Not after they had extracted 10 years of her life from her, unfortunately, but she did. And it said earlier that she left when she was 24. Isn't it interesting how in Opus Dei, you can find references to this. It's in Opus. Former members talk about it all the time. How in the very earliest days in the writings of the founder, Jose Maria Escriva, he talked about how not to go after for recruitment. He would tell people not to go after people who are over the age of 25 because they're too set in their ways. You want to know about the age when your brain gets done cooking? When you're fully developed? It's about 25, 24, 25, 23. Depends on the person. Right about in there. When did Marina leave? When she was 24. This organization knows exactly what it is doing. And why. And it's very obvious. In exchange for living at the center, she worked alongside the auxiliary numeraries, women of Opus Dei dedicated to domestic tasks, cleaning rooms and cooking for an adjacent men's residence. Later, she would teach theater classes and supervise the study rooms for the girls who regularly attended the center. Almost 10 years after leaving Opus Dei and following the complaint filed by 44 women that prompted an investigation in Argentina into human trafficking and forced labor against the institution's highest authorities in the country, Marina took advantage of the listening office opened by the organization, which she refers to in her response to this publication, to request a review of her employment history and point out that, during the time she worked there, she never signed anything. She tried twice, but according to her account and responses, it concluded that there was no employment relationship and that the only thing the young woman did at the center was help with household chores like any group of friends who live together and share the tasks, she explains. Which sounds like very like Opus Dei language. Everything for them is, oh, it's a family. There's this family attitude. We're all a part of a family here. This is your new family. You don't need to have relationships with your old family. Come and live with us here. Give us labor, and you won't mind giving us labor because that's what families do, right? Not good. Not good. If you are ever at a job, new job, you just started there, and you start hearing a whole lot about how now you're going to be a part of a family. Everybody there at your new job, they're all a part of a family. They really treat everyone like family there. Hey, maybe it'll be fine. Maybe it'll be a really great and positive experience. But be careful. Because in my personal experience, and I have some, when people say, we treat people like family, what that really means is we undervalue what you bring to the table and expect you to give more for free. That's what it actually means. The definitive step in the organization came on October 5th, 2012, with a milestone she calls fidelity, which in practice is a lifelong commitment, formalizing a kind of heavenly marriage, as Marina ironically and humorously describes it in the book. So Opus Dei members, they don't take vows in the traditional sense. They make these like promises and commitments, this fidelity and everything else. In my opinion, more of Jose Maria's reinvention of the wheel, but it's neither here nor there. Marina was almost 23 and had already graduated from the University of Navarra. During this time, she worked various jobs for the organization, such as cleaning university residences, for which she received money that all the numeraries and associates had to hand over to the director of their residence. The director then gave them enough to survive that month and pay their rent. Marina had just over a year left before she was due to leave the organization. She finally did so at Christmas 2013 after a difficult process that severely affected her mental health and after meeting a priest who recommended she see a psychologist. There was a lot of pressure to keep me from leaving. They asked me to talk to one person after another, told me to take some time, kept asking me if I was sure, and pushed me up the ranks to the head of the branch. When she asked me again if I was sure, I said yes, just like when I applied to join at 14, and back then they hadn't asked me nearly as many questions. Marina recounts her story without apparent anger or resentment. She still grapples with some of the lingering effects of her time in Opus Dei and has been a volunteer for several years with AFISE, an association that supports victims of cults and coercive groups. She hasn't named any of the people she encountered along the way who ultimately drew her in, and she avoids pointing fingers at individuals. Instead, she focuses on a structure that transformed her into something that she wasn't, and on a society that, she believes, hasn't fully recognized its true nature. So that is Marina Pareda and her new book, La Obra. Please go and purchase it. Support her if you can. I have a link to buy it on Amazon over on my website, or you can probably order it through your bookseller of choice. Or if you don't want to do that, you don't have the funds, see about requesting it through your local public library, through like interlibrary loan. Also, libraries will buy books if there's like an interest, if people are interested. So don't forget about them. Please support people writing their stories and sharing their experiences, because this is so incredibly important.